साबिक प्राइम मिनिस्टर झालानाथ खनाल की बेगम राज्य लक्ष्मी चित्रकार जलने से उनकी मौत हो गई है। नेपाल के फाइनेंस मिनिस्टर को भगा भगा के दौड़ा के मारा गया है सड़कों पर काठमांडू के, जो हमने देखा है। डिफिकल्ट टू अंडरस्टैंड व्हाट रियली वेंट रॉन्ग। इज इट जस्ट द फ्रस्ट्रेशन विथ this disparity that is happening in Nepal?
See it as an entirely negative effect. Obviously, the violence is terrible and shocking, and that kind of destruction cannot be condoned. But I think it's really an indication of the types of frustration that people.
इस सेगमेंट में हम बात करेंगे डॉक्टर सारा श्नाइडरमैन से, जो कि थोड़ी देर में हमारे साथ फोन लाइन पर जुड़ जाएंगी। दोस्तों, नेपाल में जो अनरेस्ट, जो एक अस्थिरता आ गई है यकाएक पिछले 48 घंटों में। कल हम लोगों ने आपको बताया था कि एक तो नेपाल में लोग करप्शन को लेकर के बड़े परेशान थे, उसके बाद सोशल मीडिया पर बैन लग गया, उसके बाद एक यकाएक पब्लिक बाहर आ गई सड़कों पर, और जो है वो एक अस्थिरता देखने को मिला, जिसमें पुलिस ने गोलियां चलाई, जिसमें 19 लोग यंग लोग मारे गए। आक्रोश फैल गया उसके बाद शाम तक। हालांकि होम मिनिस्टर ने रिज़ाइन कर दिया था और सोशल मीडिया बैन भी वापस ले लिया गया था, लेकिन इससे भी बात नहीं बनी। मंगलवार को दिन भर हमने देखा खतरनाक प्रोटेस्ट हुए अक्रॉस पार्टीज, अक्रॉस द पॉलिटिकल स्पेक्ट्रम। लोगों के घरों पर लोगों ने हमला किया। हमने देखा कि प्राइम मिनिस्टर के.पी. शर्मा ओली उन्होंने भी इस्तीफ़ा आखिरकार दे दिया है, और उसके बाद सरकार बर्खास्त हो गई। अब आप देखिए कि ऐसा यकाएक क्या हुआ कि नेपाल में इतना गुस्सा फूट पड़ा, फौज को बुला लिया गया है। इसमें एक अफसोसनाक बात ये भी हुई है कि लोग जो घरों पे हमला कर रहे थे, इसी में मतलब लोगों के घरों को जला भी दिया गया है। साबिक प्राइम मिनिस्टर झालानाथ खनाल की बेगम राज्य लक्ष्मी चित्रकार जलने से उनकी मौत हो गई है। इसमें तो एक हाई प्रोफाइल डेथ हुआ है इस केस में, लेकिन साबिक प्रधानमंत्री शेर बहादुर देउबा और उनकी बीवी, उन पर भी हमला हुआ है घर पे। नेपाल के फाइनेंस मिनिस्टर को भगा भगा के दौड़ा के मारा गया है सड़कों पर काठमांडू के, जो हमने देखा है। इससे हम क्या समझ लें, ये आज हमारा मेन मुद्दा है। और हमने दरख्वास्त की थी डॉक्टर सारा श्नाइडरमैन से, वो फ़ोन लाइन पर हमारे साथ जुड़ गई हैं। मैं उनका तारुफ आप लोगों के सामने कर दूं। डॉक्टर सारा श्नाइडरमैन एसोसिएट प्रोफेसर हैं यूनिवर्सिटी ऑफ ब्रिटिश कोलंबिया में। आप एंथ्रोपोलॉजी डिपार्टमेंट के साथ आप जुड़ी हुई हैं, साथ ही साथ आप क्रॉस पोस्टेड भी हैं स्कूल ऑफ पब्लिक पॉलिसी एंड ग्लोबल अफेयर्स और इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ एशियन रिसर्च। पहले भी डॉक्टर श्नाइडरमैन हमारे शो पर आ चुकी हैं बात करने के लिए। नेपाल पर आपका अच्छा खासा एक्सपर्टीज़ है। हम उनसे जानने की कोशिश करते हैं कि ये हुआ क्या है। इनको खुशामदीद कहते हैं। आइए। गुड आफ्टरनून डॉक्टर श्नाइडरमैन, थैंक यू सो मच फॉर मेकिंग टाइम फॉर आवर शो।
Thank you for having me today.
So it is surprising, in just 48 hours, Nepal, which has experimented with democracy for a while now, has suddenly descended into anarchy. That's a term that has been used by some of the analysts. And now the official reason that has been given out is that the Gen Z was very upset with corruption, mass corruption at the government level, and the inequalities that were very apparent in Nepali society. Are you satisfied with that explanation, or do you think there's something more to it?
Well, I think that's definitely the immediate impetus. I think it was a surprise to most of us who are engaged with Nepal, including many Nepalis here in Canada, what actually happened, and particularly the severity of the violence. It was known that there was going to be a protest against the social media ban, but the fact that it took this very violent turn was, I think, shocking to most people. I do think that the protest was initially in response to the social media ban, but I also think that there are several discontented parties who wish to change the trajectory of governance in Nepal. So there's been a lot of talk about this sort of spontaneous protest, actually creating the space for various other actors to participate. I don't actually can't say anything about that in any conclusive way, but it certainly provided a forum for a lot of different kinds of frustrations to merge.
But the way the parliament building was torched, don't you think that itself is a symbol of something that some people, at least some powerful sections of the population, they're not very happy with? Let's say the democratic experiment that has been on in Nepal since 2008. And many people have been demanding.
I would caution us against talking about it as dissatisfaction with the democratic experiment. I think it's rather dissatisfaction with the particular individuals and institutions of power that have, in a sense, been able to use that structure towards their own ends. So I think that's really the issue. I think most protesters are asking for more democracy, not less of it.
Because the ex-king Gyanendra, he recently made a comeback and he waded into this situation and he said that, well, look, I'm the answer to whatever wrong is happening in Nepal. And this was before the unrest really happened.
Absolutely, and this is deeply ironic, of course, that he's the symbol of a past of royalist authoritarianism. He has actually been active for quite some time, as you indicated, but the idea that the answer to abuse of power is returning to even more absolute power, I think is problematic, but he's certainly a very strategic actor in this space, and there is a portion of the population who does have that nostalgia for the past and for basically royal rule, and who's unhappy with some of the results of of how federalism has been implemented over the last several years.
Right. And if you remember in 2006 when mass protests had resulted in the king's abdication, we hadn't seen this kind of violence back then. So it's a little difficult to understand what really went wrong. Is it just the frustration with this disparity that is happening in Nepal, that you can see TikTok reels by the children of very prominent politicians of Nepal and people like them on the street who don't have the means? They really get angry that, okay, these guys are having a great life when we are at the margins.
Well, I think what accounts for the violence now is unfortunately the response of the state forces. So the police initiated that violence. I do think it began as a peaceful protest. However, there may have been other elements at play, but the murder of 19 protesters in a largely peaceful context is, I think, what then sparked the mass rioting that we've seen subsequently. So, and that's it's very sad, and is also consistent with how Nepal's armed forces have responded to various other political protests over time. I think the difference this time is that it also didn't seem to have a long tail. There was not a long-term mobilization. It kind of came together in response to the social media ban, and within a few days, you had this very violent response on the part of the state, which then caused that anger to boil over.
And also Nepal's location on the map. It is sandwiched between the People's Republic of China to the north and India to the south. And both countries have stakes, very high stakes in Nepal. The Chinese have been cozying up to the current Nepalese government for a while now, and it appears that they are very happy when it's a communist party in power and are not very keen on having somebody else in power. And the same thing happens with India, because India seems to be more comfortable if it's a non-communist government which is in power. And whenever there's a communist prime minister, then the Indian side also gets a little, let's say, they don't really warm up to the government. That has resulted in a very weird situation for Nepal, because the current prime minister, or at least before he stepped down, KP Oli, was trying to get closer and closer to China in a way to just ward off India, because India was also becoming very, very aggressive. What do you make? What sense do you get out of this? Are the Chinese responsible for this? Are the Indians responsible for this, for whatever has happened? Because a lot of analysts are saying that it is impossible that something like this would happen on its own. Somebody must have been fanning the flames.
Yes, I mean, your overall geopolitical presentation of the situation rings true to me. I don't think we know yet. I'm certainly not willing to attribute the sort of responsibility to any of these external parties. I do think that that is an unfortunate trope in the analysis of political agency in Nepal. The suggestion always, not just now, but historically as well, that it's really someone else who is driving or instigating protests. There certainly may be elements of engagement, but I think the thing to focus on here is the Nepali people, citizens of the country, and what their demands are at the moment. And also, what's really important to note is that this is a protest against the status quo in terms of those who have held political power over the last 2 decades in general. So, as you mentioned, KP Sharma Oli was the leader of the Communist Party of Nepal, United Marxist-Leninists. So he is a communist leader, but the protests are equally against him and against Nepali Congress, who's earlier held power, and you can see that in the attacks on the Duba family. So in terms of how it's being played internally, I think, and that's what distinguishes this from earlier protest movements, is this is not for or against any particular party. It's really against the entire system of reproducing a hierarchical form of power.
Yeah, I mean, when you mention status quo, they have attacked the Supreme Court, they have attacked the the Kathmandu post office as well. It has been torched.
Yeah.
And party offices of different parties. The entire Swatantra Party has actually resigned. And so there's a political vacuum all of a sudden, because we don't know who's going to be next, because the president needs to appoint somebody. But who might that be? There's no clear choice as of now. If you can tell us if you have seen any prominent names that could perhaps replace KP Sharma. Yeah.
I mean, I don't have a crystal ball. I think one of the ironies, again, is that the army is being called in to comment on and perhaps guide the next steps. And I wouldn't call the Nepal army not one of the country's most democratic institutions. So it's hard to know where that will go. I think if the powers that be are interested in actually listening to the protesters, then it would behoove them to engage younger members of both existing parties and other forms of social movements, because I think there really is a generational divide here. And a lot of the frustration is the fact that it is the same people over and over, regardless of what party they're from, who are holding power. So some sort of opening up and diversification in terms of political participation at the center. I do want to speak positively about the way in which federal restructuring of 2017 did establish new local governments all over the country, which has enabled broader participation from historically marginalized groups, but that hasn't been replicated in the central federal government. So I think it's time now to bring in some of the accomplishments and achievements of this last period of federalism from what might be seen as the margins, or from potentially more rural areas of the country, into the way in which governance at the center is restructured.
Dr. Shneiderman, we have seen this kind of popular upsurge recently in Bangladesh as well, when Sheikh Hasina's government was toppled, and this example is being given again and again. People are trying to compare Bangladesh and Sri Lanka with Nepal. Now, all of this is happening in India's vicinity. And we have seen, we don't have a big protest happening in India, but then there seems to be some kind of an anger, because some of the slogans that were used against KP Oli's government have been used by India's opposition party as well. Do you see, or do you have a sense that this kind of change can also have a negative impact on the larger neighbor of these countries, which is India?
Again, that's not my area of expertise, so I can't comment on all of those dynamics. I do think that it is interesting that in all of these contexts you've mentioned, you've had a kind of confluence of a sense of growing inequality, also a sense of greater access to knowledge of what the global economy is like, particularly through labor migration, which from Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, various parts, states of India, as well as from Nepal. So I think what you're seeing is, in a sense, greater integration of these countries and diversity of South Asian economies with the global economy, but then a kind of, in a way, backlash that comes from that, because it's a sense of revolution of rising expectations and a sense of a deep frustration that despite what is very self-evident to people who have traveled outside and worked elsewhere as a kind of global standard of living, those same standards haven't been achievable at home. And so I think there are some commonalities across the region through those experiences of young people.
Dr. Shneiderman, my last question. You saw the earthquake in Nepal and the destruction that happened in its wake and the kind of rebuilding that happened, which has taken a long time and is still ongoing in so many ways, and the resilience that the Nepalese society, the Nepali people showed at that time. Is it possible that that's kind of a society, a resilient society, can produce these kind of energies which can be negative? I mean, I don't actually remember when was the last time Nepal saw this kind of violence. This seems very spontaneous, also organized, but then you can't really have, let's say, external forces playing a big role in this sort of a violence where almost everyone is out there on the streets.
Precisely. I mean, I think, I wouldn't see it as an entirely negative effect. Obviously, the violence is terrible and shocking, and that kind of destruction cannot be condoned. But I think it's really an indication of the types of frustration that people have experienced. I do also want to note that the violence that we've seen is primarily an urban phenomena in Kathmandu, although curfews were also called in various cities all over the rest of the country. So I think it will take a little bit longer until we actually understand how people all over the country are feeling about this. And it may not be uniform. There may, of course, be diverse perspectives from different regions. And I think it will be interesting to try to understand how the process of going through post-earthquake reconstruction for those who suffered in 2015 aligns with people's sense of political consciousness. But again, the earthquake did not affect the entire country. And so we're actually looking at several distinct and yet overlapping processes here.
Dr. Sara Shneiderman, thank you so much for speaking with us. We really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you for having me. Have a good afternoon.
You too. Thank you. डॉक्टर सैरा श्नाइडरमैन यूबीसी की एसोसिएट प्रोफेसर हैं डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ एंथ्रोपोलॉजी में और यूबीसी स्कूल ऑफ पब्लिक पॉलिसी एंड ग्लोबल अफेयर्स में आप हैं और इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ एशियन रिसर्च के साथ भी आप जुड़ी हुई हैं. आप हमें बता रही थी कि बहुत सारे फैक्टर्स हैं नेपाल में जो हुआ है. कोई एक वजह तो नहीं हो सकती है, इसमें बहुत सारे मल्टीप्लिसिटी ऑफ फैक्टर्स हैं, लेकिन जो एक आक्रोश पब्लिक में था कि सरकारी तबके में इतना कुछ गलत होता है लेकिन उसका कभी गलत नतीजा उनके ऊपर नहीं निकलता है. आम आदमी जो है वो परेशान है, गुर्बत के शिकार है, वो उसके पास नौकरियां नहीं है, वो एक लाइफस्टाइल जीना तो चाहता है, वो टिकटॉक पे देखता है, रील्स इंस्टाग्राम पे देखता है, लेकिन फिर घूम फिर के वही वाले लोग जो बड़े सियासतदान हैं, उनके बच्चे बेटे बेटियां जो हैं बाहर आ रहे हैं, अपना अच्छा लाइफ जो है वो जी रहे हैं और उसके बाद रील्स बना करके भेज रहे हैं. और नेपाल का जो युवा है उसको लगता है कि भाई हमें क्या मिला. तो ये सवाल उनको परेशान कर रही थी और आखिरकार जो सोशल मीडिया बैन लग गया उस पर, तो ये गुस्सा इस तरह से फटा कि पुलिस भी जो है वो कल, और कहा कि पुलिस का दरअसल गैर जिम्मेदाराना वो एक एक्शन था कि गोलियां चला दी. पुलिस ने भी बहुत टाइम से प्रोटेस्ट देखे नहीं थे वहाँ पर. 2006 में आप याद, मैं इसीलिए डॉक्टर श्नाइडरमैन को मैंने ये दे रहा था कि एग्जाम्पल कि 2006 में जब ज्ञानेंद्र बादशाह, उनको अपनी बादशाह छोड़नी पड़ी क्योंकि पब्लिक में इतना आक्रोश था, प्रोटेस्ट चल रहे थे, आखिरकार मजबूरन छोड़ना पड़ गया था. और इतने अनपॉपुलर थे बादशाह, अब बादशाह वापस आकर के बोल रहे हैं कि भाई मुझे दो मौका. इसमें एक पैरेलल मुझे दिखता है, ईरान के जो पहलवी शाह थे उनके बेटे जो हैं वो भी बोल रहे हैं मुझे दो मौका. लेकिन क्या पब्लिक मौका देना चाह रही है? डॉक्टर श्नाइडरमैन ने कहा, और बहुत से ऐसे लोग हैं जो कह रहे हैं कि नहीं, पब्लिक को डेमोक्रेसी तो चाहिए, दे जस्ट नीड मोर अकाउंटेबिलिटी, दे डोंट वांट टू रिटर्न टू मॉनर्की। राजस्थानी जी नमस्कार।
नमस्कार, बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद
जी।
ये तो हम देखा, जब पुरानी बात है, रानी रत्ना और राजा आया करते थे भारत में। ये तो हमारा एक अंग था, ये नेपाल। संस्कृति भी भारी मिलती जुलती।
जी, वो संस्कृति की बात तो हम समझ सकते हैं, लेकिन कभी भारत का अंग नहीं था नेपाल, वो हमेशा अलग ही रहा है, इंडिपेंडेंट रहा है।
हाँ, ये तो बात ठीक है
जी।
लेकिन फिर भी आपस में राजा जनक से लेके देखो कितना पुरानी
वो देखिए वो कहानी उसको हकीकत में ना ही लाए तो अच्छा है। जी
हुआ
जी।
इतने बांस हुए, राजा मारा गया, बाद में दूसरा बना, वो चला गया, फिर बाद में चाइना घुस गया, अब हम भी घुसे हुए हैं, ऐसी बात नहीं है। तो भारी शक्तियां भी है, ऐसी बात तो नहीं है। खैर यहाँ तक मुझे नॉलेज है काफी। तो लेकिन बदलाव तो जनता मांग रही है। अब तो बात तो ये होगी ना, अब नौजवान आगे आए हैं, तो ये भी सच है। इंडिपेंडेंस, भ्रष्टाचार में डूब गया नेपाल, भ्रष्टाचार का एक नारा लग रहा है। और इतना धनी भी देश नहीं है नेपाल, जो है इतना धनी नहीं है। तो एक धनी नहीं है, दूसरा भ्रष्टाचार। तो जनता को क्या मिलेगा फिर? तो नौकरियां, जैसे आप कह रहे हैं, इसका भी एक कारण हो सकता है। लेकिन कहीं न कहीं चाइना और हम भी साथ में हैं, ये इतने प्यारे।
जी जी, बहुत शुक्रिया, थैंक यू वेरी मच राजस्थानी जी।